need to read this out before the meeting starts. So councillors are reminded that to take part in the meeting you must have an open mind so you can take all the relevant considerations presented in the meeting into account before your decision. By attending today, you've decided that you will listen to all the points of view expressed by the speakers and public and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined the application. The members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. I'll speak about that later. When the light is amber, there is 1 minute remaining. This meeting will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel. If any members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then please do contact a member of staff, and that will be Catherine, second from the end there if you could. If you're planning on filming or recording the meeting, then please do let us know so we can ensure you're not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information available on the Council's website. So I won't be in trouble this evening. Okay, so we do quick housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if one does go out, it's through the double doors at the back there. Toilets, if you need the toilets, they're out where you came in and down the corridor on the right hand side. Okay, we will just have a quick introduction. So on the opposite side nearest yourself is Cllr Cross and Holland, who represent Hamble and Netley, and Jane O'Sullivan and Steve Holes, who are Bursledon and Netley members. Nearest the screen on my side, we have Claire Martin, Senior Planning Officer, Rebecca Altman, another planning officer. I'm Tonya Craig, I chair this meeting and also represent Bursledon and Netley. To my left we have Ross McLean, local area manager, Catherine Collins from Democratic Services, and Abida Chowdhury from legal specialist. Okay, we have no apologies. Nobody in the public wanting to speak other than their items on the agenda. So have we got anybody that wanted to speak that haven't actually come forward? Nope. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Any members? Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to declare a personal interest in agenda item 8 as a friend of mine is a near neighbour to the site.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you've completed the form to hand in afterwards, have you? Are we still completing forms? Do we need a personal? So we don't, that's fine. You looked at me scared then.
Yes.
Sorry.
Catherine Hill.
That's fine. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Steve.
Chair, I'm quite happy to recommend approval, but I just wondered if there's an update on the 2 motions that we sent to County Council and Post Office.
There are no updates at the moment. Did you want to just give an update on what is happening there with the petition?
Yes.
Just so we've got that on.
Sorry, Chair, the petition for local crossing is being presented to the County Council next Thursday at its full council meeting. It's got over 600 signatures online and I believe paper signatures as well, so considerable amount of support for something more to be done to make that area safe, even if it's not a lighted crossing. Thank you.
Brilliant. It's just worth having that there so that we know it's recorded, that it's not just a motion by us, it's progressing further as well. So, yeah. Okay, everyone happy with the minutes of the last meeting? Do I have a proposer? You propose, seconder? Jane? So all those in favour of accepting? Thank you very much. Ross, is there any anything to come out of those minutes? Nothing? No, brilliant, thank you. Chair's announcements, I don't have any at this meeting, so we'll go over to Ross for the local area report, please.
Thank you, Chair. 4 recommendations in total from my report. I'll just run through those very quickly. So the first one is to approve the allocation of 4,500 from developer contributions to enhance the Hamble Rail Trail. Secondly, to note the reallocation of £20,000 from public art developer contributions to allocate to the proposed Walking and Wheeling Festival art and performance event on the Hamble Rail Trail. Thirdly, to approve the spend of £455 for a new bin on beach gardens, and to note the good news stories in Appendix 1 of all the stuff that this panel has contributed to through funding and recommendations, and you'll see some pictures and some write-ups and some good things going on in the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ross. It's always nice to get the feedback. I think there's, knocking around on the other side, some thank yous from the play school children as well, which was money that we gave previously. Members, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to propose this set-out. I also want to thank Ross for the update on the projects that we've carried out this year, including the photographs. It really gives an impression of how we've spent the money that's available. Councillors often say there's no money available these days, but somehow we keep finding little bits of money, mainly from developers' contributions, and it's important that we publicise the fact that we are spending this money and how we're spending it. And the question I asked the other evening was whether we can put this out in more, readable to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm thoroughly encouraged to promote it through your social media channels and other such like. We're doing the same through our council channels as well. So yeah, please do shout about the good stuff.
As we know, nobody reads minutes, so nobody outside the committee room reads the minutes anyway. Certainly not the public. So they need to know that these things are happening.
Thank you, Steve. Jane.
Yeah, I'd just like to highlight the Walking and Wheeling Festival, which sounds fascinating. It's a project obviously linked with the celebration of 200 years of railways, and obviously railways are so important historically with this area, not least with the transport of the strawberries. So linked performances outside, railway history, and all taking place outdoors as well, which sounds really exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Is that seconding?
Yes, Elsie.
Thank you. Any other members? No. I should have probably said it in Chair's announcements actually, but it's just come up as a thought as my brain works. We gave money to Stan's Netley, the book, in one of our previous LACs. I actually went down last week to actually meet him and sort of have a look at the book and things. Absolutely delighted, and the book's brilliant. So I've asked if one could go in the library, be donated to the library down at Hamble. Hopefully that will be done. But yeah, I should have probably said that. That was just another good news of where we've given some funding to that's worked well. Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded. All those in accepting that? That's everybody again. Thank you very much. Okay, well, next we've got presentation of plan guidelines. Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is just a quick run through of planning guidelines for just for everybody's benefit. In terms of how proposals are determined, they must be determined on planning grounds and in line with the development plan unless there's material considerations that indicate otherwise. And the development plan for Eastleigh is the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan, which was adopted in April 22, and the Hampshire Renewals and Waste Plan, if relevant to the case. Other relevant considerations can include adopted supplementary planning documents, for example, the quality places, SPD, parking standards and planning obligations, relevant government policy including the National Planning Policy Framework and its presumption in favour of sustainable development. For the first item on this agenda, the Planning and Listed Buildings and Conservation Area Act is also relevant for developments affecting heritage assets. And the National Planning Policy Framework is a material consideration of significant weight which takes precedent over the development plan, which do not accord with the MPPF. Development policies, sorry. The MPPF's key requirements include delivering sustainable development without delay, meeting housing needs and significantly boosting housing supply, promoting growth of the economy, requiring high standards of design and preventing and mitigating impacts. It includes a presumption in favour of sustainable development unless adverse impacts outweigh those benefits. And the three threads of sustainability are economic, social and environmental, which are interdependent of each other and mutually supportive. Other considerations that are material are the planning history, previous planning applications or decisions, including appeal decisions where relevant, and site-specific matters such as highway matters, residential amenity, ecology, drainage, trees, consultee and third-party comments, and precedent case law. Non-planning issues are things that cannot be taken into account when making the decisions include moral, racial and religious views, devaluation of property, loss of a private view, breach of a legal covenant, and or matters covered by other laws such as building regulations and environmental permits. Personal views about the character of applicants can't be taken into account, nor can civil matters, for example, boundary disputes. Any decision that's made contrary to the recommendation that's set out tonight must be clearly explained and minuted with clear reasons given for approval or refusal. There's an option to defer to seek amendments or further information, and it must be indicated what those are. And there is an option to add further controls on use and details required if considered reasonable in planning terms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to straight on to the first application for land adjoining for Brookfield, and that's you again. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first application on the agenda is for a site known as land adjoining for Brookfield on Providence Hill, and the proposal is for a 69-bed care home and use class C2, along with 5 dwellings which would be use class C3, age restricted, with associated access landscaping works. Just before I go into the main presentation, there were some updates circulated earlier today, so just to quickly run through those. We received an updated air quality impact assessment, and that has now been reviewed by the Council's Environmental Health Officer, who agrees with the conclusions that there will be no adverse impact on the air quality management area on Providence Hill, but has requested an update to the construction environmental management plan condition, along with 2 additional conditions relating to electric vehicle charging and kitchen extract, and both of those were set out on the update paper in full. So the recommendation before you tonight is subject only to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. So the site location is to the sort of north of Providence Hill and south of Gosling's Turning. It's a roughly triangular site. A roughly triangular site which extends to the east behind 4 properties on Providence Hill here, which is 1 to 4 Brookfield. I've highlighted some of the key elements of the surrounding area, which include the nearest neighbouring properties, the telephone exchange here to the east, the windmill fields, site of importance for nature conservation over here, and the Bursledon Grade 2 star listed windmill, which lies up here to the north. And then all of this land to the north is also part of the Bursledon Windmill Conservation Area. I just wanted to highlight some of the constraints which have led to the layout of the development, which you're going to see later. The site is an allocation in the local plan. It's a housing allocation for around 19 dwellings. But that doesn't mean that other forms of residential development aren't acceptable, and in this case we consider the care community use to be an appropriate form of residential form of development that equally contributes to the council's housing land supply. As you can see here, the red hashed area is the conservation area, and then you can just about see hopefully the red outline of Bursledon Windmill and its listed buildings. The green is the protected trees which lie along the north boundary and part of the eastern boundary. I don't think you can see, but the site of importance for nature conservation is just here to the right there. So as I explained the site layout, it will make more sense. So this is the proposed site layout. The 5 dwellings are on the western side of the site here. The main access to the site would be from roughly central point on Providence Hill. At the moment there's a gated access which members may have seen on site. That would create a more formal access into the site, with a road going down the land levels, because the land levels dropped quite significantly from Providence Hill down to the east and north. So this area here is the lowest point of the site. Oh, excuse me, I haven't finished that one. The lowest point of the site. So some of the key constraints that have resulted in the layout here are the need to maintain a view of the windmill, which I'll discuss a bit more in a minute, which is the grade 2 star listed windmill. That has created this sort of wedge shape through the centre of the site, free of development. Then there's also a requirement for buffer zones to the brook, so there's a stream which runs along the north of the site here, and also a buffer to the adjacent site of importance for nature conservation. Other considerations, of course, include impacts on neighbours and designing the scheme around the significant changes in land levels. So just to confirm on the heritage point, this is only a rough indication of the view. In the conservation area guidelines, there is an indication of what this key view is. So from Providence Hill, looking across roughly from adjacent to number 4 Brookfield, you get a view of the windmill through the trees. I doubt you can see it on this picture, but when we were on site last week, you could see the windmill from that point through the trees there, more so in the winter months. So that's been a key aspect of the design, and the heritage officer is satisfied that the development would not harm the listed buildings or the conservation area, and I believe he actually considered that it enhanced the view. So that's a positive. I've just taken or included some site photographs from around the site. So the first one and the second one are views from Providence Hill, and the second one shows the access as it currently is with the gate. The other two show views from near to the Brookfield properties. So you've got the front of numbers 3 and 4 Brookfield, just here. There's an access existing that leads to some parking next to number 4 Brookfield. And then if you can see that a bit more clearly on this photograph, which is looking back towards the side of number 4 Brookfield. These photographs are taken from within the actual site. We've got, so photographs 5 and 6 are views to the west side of the site, towards where the cottages would be. Photograph number 7 is taken from the kind of the main area of the site, looking towards the telephone exchange, and you can just about see the Brookfield properties here on the right, and you've got the telephone exchange here. And then view number 8 is looking east along the southern boundary of the site, and you can see properties in Goslings turning behind the trees. Just carrying on around the site, so 9 and 10 are the sort of the main area of the site, looking towards the eastern boundary and the Brookfield properties. And then numbers 11 is looking up to the rear boundary of number 4 Brookfield. And then this one is taken a bit further along, showing the rear boundaries of all of the Brookfield properties, and you can just about see part of the telephone exchange on the far left. These photographs now just show a bit more clearly the existing parking area that's next to number 4 Brookfield, and the existing sort of pedestrian access bit down towards the site. And then this is further along, looking back towards the side of 4 Brookfield, with Providence Hill to the right beyond these mature trees. Photograph number 15 is taken from the site, looking up towards number 4 and back out to Providence Hill. And I think the last one was from within the site, looking back out of the proposed access to Providence Hill. And then the final lot of photos is taken from Goslings Turning, and I included the summer and winter photographs just to show that we are fully aware of the difference in the tree screening between the seasons. So there are gaps in the trees, and you can see the site quite clearly. See, during the summer it's a lot more full, but during the winter those gaps are larger and there is more of a view. I've got the elevation plans. The actual care home itself, this is the main care home, so this would be up to 4 stories in height from the lowest ground level on the site. But it has been designed around the levels and would incorporate various elements to break up the bulk, which includes projecting gable elements, differing heights of the roof, sort of chimneys and dormers, and various features, so that the mass of the building is broken up visually, along with the difference in materials. And the materials would mainly be red brick and the dark cladding that you can see there. These are the east and west elevations, which give you a bit more of an indication of the changing land levels. So this is looking from the east, looking west. So you this would be the main part of the care home behind the Brookfield properties, and then it extends in a kind of L shape across here, and then this is looking to the east with the main entrance to the care home and showing the sort of projection northwards. And these elevations are to demonstrate the sunken courtyard, which is proposed on the southern side of the site, which you can see is much lower down here, and you've got the various views of that. And what I've got now on the next slide is just a few images of that sunken courtyard, because if you see the report, you see that the urban design officers and the landscape officers both raised some concerns about whether the sunken courtyard would provide a good level of amenity in terms of its sort of daylight and attractiveness. And the applicants provided these photographs of another site that it has a similar sunken courtyard. And on the basis of this, it was felt that with the right sort of landscaping scheme, as you can see here in this plan, then this could be an attractive space. And a daylight and sunlight report was also provided to show that there would be suitable daylight and sunlight both to the sunken courtyard and to the rooms at lower ground floor level in the care home. I've included the floor plans, but I won't sort of go into too much detail on these, but the lower ground floor and the ground floor would be where sort of the main ancillary elements of the care home would be. So the main entrance, the dining room, the lounge, along with some residents' bedrooms. And again here you can see the sunken courtyard at lower ground floor level, and the main entrance here at ground floor level. The bin storage is also at lower ground floor level and is an enclosed store with a sort of lift access. The first and second floor levels are mainly resident bedrooms. There are some roof terraces proposed, and the main ones being a small one here on the north elevation and one here that projects to the west, and these are proposed to have 2 metre high screening, which I'll explain a bit more a bit further on in the slides. The houses on the west side of the site would be 2-storey, but with the first floor contained within the roof space to keep them fairly modest in height. They've been designed with similar materials to the care home so that it creates a cohesive appearance to the scheme. The floor plans just show that all of them are 2-bedroom properties, and they, the idea of how it works in other sites is that they are often accommodated by people with relatives in the care home. In terms of landscaping, I know you won't be able to see any other detail really on this, but the landscaping proposals have been very carefully considered with the council's landscape consultant and the ecologist, and has been designed to create an attractive setting, but also to achieve the 10% biodiversity net gain. All of the trees, I think there might be sort of bar one, I think all of the trees along this boundary and the northern boundary, site boundaries are proposed to be retained. There are some trees within the site that have been or are proposed to be removed. The council's tree officer has reviewed all of the proposals and the arboricultural report and raised no objection to those being lost. And as I said, the mature trees along the boundaries are all proposed to be retained. It's also, the access has also been designed to ensure that it won't harm the protected trees, and again the tree officer is satisfied with those proposals. One of the comments that has come up throughout the process is the need to bulk up the planting along both the northern and southern boundaries. The latest layout plans did show additional understory planting along Providence Hill, but the landscape officer still felt there could be more along the northern boundary, so you'll see that the landscaping condition includes that as a stipulation. So the final landscape scheme would include additional understory planting along the north side. I think as everyone is aware, one of the main matters that's been carefully considered throughout this process is the impact on the neighbouring residents. There was a committee site visit last week where these views were shown, but I have included a selection of photos here that were taken from the residents sort of most closely affected. Number one is the view from number 1 Brookfield looking towards the site. Number 2 is then towards the bottom of the garden of number 1 and number 2 Brookfield. with a telephone exchange there to the right, and the site is just behind here. Number 3 is then looking a bit more to the northwest from that same, or roughly the same spot there, showing the site here. And the number 1's garden, as members will have seen on site, does extend a little bit further down, just off this photo here. Photographs 4 and 5 show the views from the rear windows of number 2, Brookfield. So you can see there is an extensive view across the site currently, to the trees beyond, and also you can see the Gosling's Turning properties between gaps in the trees from these properties. And photographs 6 and 7 are then taken from number 4 Brookfield, where the care home would be behind and partially to the side. So you can see the views as existing from that property there. Then we've got these photographs taken from Gosling's Turning. So numbers 1 and 2 are taken from, this one is taken from the rear garden of number 32 looking towards the site. So that's sort of the side of the rear garden looking towards the site. Number 2 is this one of the side facing windows of number 32, and you can see the gaps in a tree looking towards the site. Number 3 is taken from sort of directly in front of number 32, and again you can see the row of trees and the site beyond. And then number 4 is showing number 33 Gosling's Turning with the 4 windows that face towards the application site. The applicants have provided various plans that's allowed us to further assess the impact on these properties, and the section plans here quite helpfully show the difference in levels of the site. So although this is a 4-storey building, because of how it's sat into the site, the upper 2 floors would roughly be in line with the ground and first floor of the Brookfield properties, with the increase in height of 1.4 roughly, sorry I've lost my measurement there. I think it's 1.4 metres taller than the ridge heights of numbers 1 to 4 Brookfield. You can see here the change down with the sunken garden here. Then there's an area of land, you might not be able to see, there's a red line here which indicates the rear boundaries of 2 to 4 Brookfield. Then you've got a bit of land here where there's proposed to be tree planting, then the land drops again to the sunken garden, then you have the care home building there. And to the properties in Gosling's Turning, there's a distance of at least 40.8 metres between the back of the care home and the nearest side windows of the neighbouring properties. On this side, between this elevation of the care home and the windows of numbers 3 and 4, there's a distance of 38.4 metres, and then to the windows of numbers 1 and 2, there's a distance of, yeah, that's the 38.4, sorry, I've got to put that one down. I've got some other measurements as well which were asked for, which was the distance between the rear elevation and the rear boundaries of the Brookfield properties. There's approximately 19 metres to the boundaries of 2 to 4 Brookfield. To number 1, there is, from the projecting element of the care home, there's a distance of 13.2 metres, but at an angle towards the lower, sort of the furthest part of the rear garden, there's a distance of approximately 5 metres. I'll show you that a bit more clearly on a plan in a minute. This is a further section plan that shows the projecting element here. That's the bit that's a bit closer to the boundaries of numbers 1 and 2. So there, we've also got various 3D models which again help to demonstrate the relationship. So the distances I was just quoting there, so from the back of this projection here to the boundaries here is 13.2 metres. But from here to this lower part of number 1's garden, there's about a 5 metre distance there. And between this side elevation of the care home and the side boundary of number 4, there's a distance of about 10 metres. So I've got these images from various different angles which show the relationship between the buildings and the surrounding properties. And that's a slightly higher level view there. I do have, if it works, a animation that was prepared by the applicants. Yep, it's working. So I'll just play that. sorry, I'll just stop that. Right. One of the other key matters for consideration, which we're already seeing written out in detail in the report, is parking. The actual application proposal has 34 parking spaces, which is 6 for the dwellings and 28 for the care home. The council's adopted parking standards, if you look at the requirement for spaces per staff at the care home and per room, along with the actual number of parking spaces required for the 2-bed dwellings, would be 40 spaces. So the overall shortfall on site is 6 spaces. There would also be a displacement of 4 cars that currently park next to number 4 Brookfield on what is an area of private land. All of these factors have been taken into account in looking at the parking situation. In terms of the number of spaces in relation to the size of the care home, it's pretty well comparable to other care homes in the borough and the number of parking spaces we have, and is also in line with Colton Care, who's the applicant, their parking requirements for their sites. There's also a proposal to have a green travel plan in place, which is secured by condition, which would encourage staff to use public transport to further reduce the additional cars entering the site. In terms of displaced parking, it's recognised that Providence Hill has limited parking availability. I think we all know that, we've seen it on site. There is a lay-by in front of number 1 to 4 Brookfield, which, although this photograph, I think there's 3 cars shown here, I think in terms of its actual size and taking account of parking road restrictions such as the double yellow lines, it can take 4 cars. There's quite often more cars parked there, but formally it can accommodate 4 cars. So there's no guarantee that that lay-by would be available for those displaced 4 vehicles, but this has been considered by the Highway Authority, and the conclusion is that whilst there is limited parking around, the displacement of the 4 vehicles alone would not cause a severe impact in terms of highway safety impacts on that road network. And the overall shortfall has been justified by, as I said, by the nature of the use and the travel plan, which would encourage sustainable travel. So it's very much a sort of balanced consideration, taking account of all the relevant factors, which is detailed a lot more clearly in the report there. But the parking provision is considered to be acceptable and would not have a harmful impact on the highway network, and there's no objection from the Highway Authority. I'll just do a quick run through of the key considerations, because there are quite a lot more that have gone into the application. So in terms of the principle of development, it is an allocated site in the urban edge. So the principle is sound in that respect. It would contribute towards the need for older persons accommodation, which there is an identified need in the borough, and would contribute towards the council's land supply. Design matters, the layout and design have taken account of significant constraints and land levels. The external appearance is considered to be well designed with appropriate materials and an attractive development. The residential amenity has been carefully considered, and it does meet policy guidance and requirements in relation to distances between properties to protect privacy. Trees and landscaping, again, has been through a lot of consideration, and with the retention of trees and new landscaping and planting around the site. Ecology, the appropriate buffers have been provided to the stream and to the sink, and the council's ecologist is satisfied that that would ensure no adverse impact on those sites. There are mitigation measures that would be put in place for protected species, and 10% biodiversity net gain has been shown to be achievable and would be conditioned. The access and parking, the access design is acceptable as confirmed by highways and by the tree officer in terms of the impact on trees, and the parking numbers are considered justified, and we have no objection from the Highway Authority. Other matters that have been considered include, but not limited to, pollution, drainage, sustainable design. These have all been satisfactorily addressed throughout the process, and the application would be subject to a Section 106 agreement, which would include contributions towards various infrastructure. So the recommendation before you is for permission subject to the conditions outlined in the report and subject to completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. there's lots of people that have signalled to speak on this one, and I'm quite fair as a chair, because I know that this can be very contentious. It's where you're living. So I'm prepared to go a bit longer than the 3 minutes, because it should be 3 minutes for all of you to speak. What I would just ask though is please try not to repeat things that have been said by previous speakers, and to try and keep your points sort of to the point, if you like. But I'll call you up in the order that I've got here, and to put your points across, and then it will go over to the applicant, and I will have to be fair to the applicant. Whatever time I give you objectives to speak, I would have to give to the applicant as well. So just bear that in mind too. So the first person I have to speak on this is Sonia Edwards. If you'd like to come up to the front on the microphone. And don't worry, we don't eat people, we are very friendly.
You go first. Right, I'm no good at things like this, so. Right, well first of all my question would be, alright, there's 6 parking spaces ashore. I know that Cllr do have minibuses that serve their care homes. Where are they going to park? Are they going to take a majority of these spaces? I know that was a question that Rebecca did put to Cllr, and as far as I'm aware, there's been no answer to. I would then go on to say that congestion in the area is already at an all-time high with the overdevelopment. The National Highways Department have in the past acknowledged this, and plans were put forward for improvements to Junction 8 Windover roundabout off the M27. This has now been cancelled due to lack of funds. So how can it be justified that you then carry on building when there's no infrastructure or anything to support it? Public transport links to Bursledon and Providence Hill are extremely poor. The train station is a long walk and very hilly. Bus services are quite limited. GP services have moved from Lowford to Hamble, so trying to get a bus just down to the GP surgery and tying it in with buses, obviously something the elderly need, is going to be nigh on impossible. And despite the huge demand that this development will put on the GP services, apparently they didn't have to be, they did not need to be consulted in this, which seems quite mad to me, but there you go. They are very stretched due to overdevelopment of the local area. There's thousands of homes have been added, so that I think is quite a big thing, the GP services. The building itself, well, you can put a bit of black paint on it, it doesn't mean to say that it's in keeping with the area. There are no other 4-storey buildings in Bursledon. It's quite a sort of low-level villager feel to it, really. I think it's far too large for the plot of land. The fact that you have to have roof terraces is because so much of the ground level is taken up by the footprint of the building. If that was smaller, you wouldn't have to put roof terraces on, which then overlook properties. Yeah, is going to be screening, but I do believe people will still be able to look over it. And it goes literally right over into neighbouring gardens. So, yeah, right, I've lost my place now, sorry. Right, the loss of land actually will be detrimental to wildlife. So you can, there's all these things put in place to protect these species, like bat boxes, relocate slow worms and things like that. But what's not being accounted for is the loss of their feeding ground. That field provides a massive feeding ground for the bats and hedgehogs, slow worms, all these that are, sort of under threat. It's their feeding area. The more land you take, the less feeding areas they've got, the more they're going to sort of starve, and yeah, it's just a massive lack of feeding, and I think that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. I'm going to take a couple at a time, and then I'm going to ask Rebecca to come back on things if she needs to, because otherwise we might lose our place. John White next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just start by saying that we started off when the application first came in and actually said we've got no objection in principle to the fact that a care home is going to be built on the site. We know the site has been earmarked for development, and our objection, we didn't want to object in principle. However, as mentioned, our assertion is that the care home is far too large. It's not within keeping, I think it's just been mentioned, so I'm sorry if I mention it again, but we don't feel, having been a resident of Bursledon for over 40 years, it's within keeping with our village, the size of it. And that's acknowledged, I think, by the planning officer at paragraph 117, which acknowledges the large size and the fact it's the largest building in the area. So I'd just like to make that point at first. In the report, I've noted that the planning officer continually acknowledges the size of the care home and how large it is, and actually mentions how it's directly adjacent to our properties. So when I speak about our properties, just for context, I live next door to my mum, who is number 1 Brookfield, we're number 2 Brookfield, so we live next to each other. So as you've seen on the plans, the property is directly behind ours. And in fact, in paragraph 153, the planning officer says the views are significantly altered and a number of windows are facing towards our houses and gardens. I take that's word for word that she's quoted in there. So it's really been acknowledged straight away that it's going to have a significant impact. So our objection is based on the fact that we're going to be overlooked and our loss of privacy. So as I said, we've wanted to work with the applicant from day one, we tried to. The applicant submitted an image from our garden, in fact from my mum's garden, but obviously as the committee will be aware on their visit, the bottom of the gardens are open, so they're kind of shared for the children to have access and play. And an image was submitted. We had an issue with the image and felt that it didn't actually show a true representation of indeed the fact of the height of the care home. In fact, when we had it measured, we had somebody come out to do that for us. The image that the applicant provided was about 4 metres under what we felt was the true height. So we went away and had our own images drawn up, which I've been told we can't supply tonight. But the planning officer has acknowledged that the applicant's photograph or image was incorrect, and that can't be used either. So my point is, I don't think it's fair to be able to make a decision without that image. Now I've emailed the planning officer to ask why the applicant won't submit the images they've had done, bearing in mind the planning officer had asked the applicant to have some verified images drawn up. The applicant had sent somebody, a professional, out to come and do those images, who visited my mother's property twice and said they were going to produce some images which still haven't been produced. So I've asked the planning officer where those images are, but she said she couldn't force the applicant to provide those images. So I guess from our point of view, the big question is why would they not submit images of the care home from our gardens? And I suppose that's a question for the applicant. Also, I know the planning officer says she can't force that, but that's our big question. So while we've seen the animation, but on the animation it clearly doesn't show any images from our garden. So the applicant hasn't spoken to us, so we can only infer that it would support our objections and uphold those, and actually look very negatively upon the application.
Sorry, John, you're kind of
sorry.
well over 3
I'm well over,
minutes.
sorry, I'll go very quick now. So very quick, just to say, the 37.5 metres distance from our windows is only an approximation. If you read the report, it just says approximately. So can I just clarify if that's actually verified or not? Because it's a very small distance over the 35 metres of the council's guidance. So that's that point. Very quickly then, on to parking. You've seen 10 cars displaced. We know we have no legal right to park, but obviously it's going to cause a massive issue. Highway said there's no safety issue, but there is for my family. They have to get into a car on the public highway, which is already really, really oversized. So just in summary, our objection is based on the size of the property and on the displacement of parking, and we just feel the site is wholly inappropriate for a development of this size and this magnitude. Thank you. Apologies.
Thanks, John.
All right.
Rebecca, do you want to come back on those two for the next one?
Thank you. There's just a couple of points. I think there was a question at the very beginning about minibuses. The question was answered. I think I did mention it in the report somewhere, but it would be easily missed. So the Colton Care do have minibuses, but I was informed that they are for dropping off purposes only. They don't require dedicated parking on site. They wouldn't be parked there permanently. In terms of the distances, the question that was just raised about the distances, yes, they are verified. Well, they're measured directly from the plans, which are to scale. So the 38.5 metres and the 37.5 metres that I quote in paragraph 152, they have been taken directly from the plans, which are scaled measurements. So yes, they are correct.
Thank you very much. I've got Teresa White, but I think it's Catherine you're speaking on behalf. Yeah. Again, if you can just keep points and try to not repeat what's been said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Teresa White, who lives in number 1 Brookfield. Okay, so she'd like to object firstly for the size of this care home. I don't think anybody can appreciate the huge size of this care home until you actually step into her rear garden. You really can't see how big this is going to be. Just looking at that, you can't see it, okay? It is huge, okay, first of all. 4 stories, it's totally overwhelming. It's not at all in keeping with the dwellings that are already along Providence Hill. To have such a tall building in the village, it'll completely tower over not only my mum's property, but all the 4 properties there that block any daylight and the views, etc., to the Windmill and Windmill Woods. It's also in close proximity to the back of her garden, and it will obviously cost her privacy as well. I would also like to question the proximity. You did say 5 metres there, because her garden extends another 9 metres. I'd like to query that, because 5 metres is obviously very, very, 5 metres is such a small, 5 metres, if you think 5 metres between your rear garden and a monstrosity like that, so perhaps we could look at that again, but 5 metres is almost touching distance from someone's small back garden to a 4-storey building. But anyway, perhaps someone could query that, please. So I'd like to query the boundary of the care home. It would be in line and literally within touching distance. So how can a proposed building be so close to someone's boundary? And these are properties that have been there since 1898 we're talking about. Okay. Also the parking situation, okay, we've already gone over that, but my mother is obviously not elderly, but needs somewhere to be able to park, and obviously people getting into their cars, visitors and whatever. Also, another thing that hasn't been brought up is things like emergency services. Over the past couple of years, we've had to, unfortunately, use emergency services a lot. Where would they go now? We've had ambulances called a lot in the last couple of years, and they've had to park into the telephone exchange, places like that. What would happen now if we needed an ambulance, fire engine? Where would they park if the lay-by was full and they've got no private parking? All of these things haven't been accounted for, and especially now we're talking about a lack of 4 spaces and another 10 spaces. I don't think any of that's been taken into account, so we'd like to bring that up as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
Rebecca wants to come back now, so I'll bring her back in for a move on.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify about the distances. So the 5 metres that I mentioned was between the corner of this lower element of the care home, and I'll show you the elevation in a minute, to this corner of the rear garden of number 1. So it's not the 4-storey element, and it's at an angle here, it's the corner. There's a distance then of 13.2 metres between here and the garden boundary here of number 2, and then between the main 4-storey element here and the nearest garden boundary, it's 19 metres. So the 5 metres is this angled distance here, and if I just find the elevation again, so it's from this corner of this projecting element, which is much lower than the main care home building. Yeah. Excuse me. So I just wanted to
Sorry, could I just clarify one thing?
I can't. You may want to speak to one of the other speakers and get them to make your point, but I can't bring you back in, John.
Yeah, no worries, that's fine.
Sorry. That was it. Okay. I think we've got next. Is it you're gonna hate me? Is it Mr. Georgius? Probably said that wrong. Apologies.
Well, good evening all. I'm Mr. Christopher Georgius, who live in number 4 Brookfield. Right next to this land is upon this application. I'm strongly opposing objecting this development on the same grounds that I would imagine all local residents have done so. Realistically, no one wants a large out-of-place building next to your house, especially not in your back garden. The obvious reasons are increasing traffic to what is already a busy area, increasing pollution due to years of noisy construction, the loss of the surrounding landscape, especially the impact and loss of the wildlife, the loss of our privacy. For all the above reasons, this is not a suitable place for such a large development. On the other matter of my personal problems and concerns, in a serious stressful situation, there is an ongoing boundary dispute between myself and the developer. To cut it short, my property was part of this land that relates to this application, but my property was not separated from this land. I do not need you to tell you how expensive solicitor fees are. I have been trying to resolve this for over a year and it's still not resolved. I have recently received a verbal phone call by the developer that this will be resolved without losing my property. However, I feel it's reasonable and ethical to insist that you make it a requirement that this is and any other dispute matters with all other residents are resolved before a planning application is approved. Now, one final thing to mention is the photographic evidence you produced recently here do not actually show the actual impact on our lives and on our property. It is a large development and it needs to be taken seriously. And basically, my parking space is inside the developer's boundaries. So I have no parking space. So unless my problem is resolved, my solicitor is considering applying to the High Court to delay this development, if it's possible, until we get a resolution to resolve my problem. Basically, my property is inside these boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything you need to come back to that?
Only to say that the private boundary disputes are not material planning considerations, which was mentioned at the start of the presentation.
Yeah, but
Okay, sorry, I can't have you. Yeah, we know that, Mr. Georgius. We did speak to you on site, and it's not a planning consideration, so we can't actually get involved in that. Totally feel for you, but it's not a planning consideration for us here this evening. I've got Dave Edwards next.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of my points have probably already been covered off, so I might be a bit quicker on this one. But the first one, I'm coming from the point of view we live in Gosling's Turning. I know this point has already been made, but it is about the appearance of the site and the loss of privacy and additional noise that this will inevitably create. Reference is made in the original proposals that from Providence Hill, the building will appear smaller as it's cut into the sloping ground, as was mentioned earlier as well. But no reference is made that from where we live on the north side, all 4 stories will be visible. This will completely change the view from Gosling's Turning. We feel our right of privacy will be lost, with a clear view into our house and garden, as shown earlier on the plans there. As the proposal shows a building with the roof line and height in line with ours, and also the roof terraces, although I appreciate the screens that are going up there as well. Reference is also made in the proposal about the reduced number of windows on the Brookfield side, but from the Gosling side, all bedrooms face or have a window or door out, which increase the noise levels, and again look over our property, reducing our privacy. Also, as mentioned earlier, on the Gosling's Turning will be the bin collection point, which will cause additional noise. As such, I'm concerned therefore about the impact and amenity value on our property due to the size and nature of the development, which will completely change the outlook from our property. My second point was nature, which has already been covered, so I won't go on there again. My third point was on traffic. As most people here will know, Windhover roundabout is very busy at all times, and at certain periods such as rush hour it comes to a complete standstill as motorway traffic diverts along the A27 up Providence Hill. Already makes it incredibly hard for local residents to pull out onto the road. Adding construction traffic and then day-to-day traffic once built in and out of the site will only exacerbate the situation. This level of traffic and pollution is already damaging to local residents' health and well-being and should be looked at for ways of improvement as much as possible. My fourth point was staff and parking, which we've already covered, but one further question I've just been asked, just on the question of the minibuses, if they just do drop-offs, is where they will actually do those drop-offs from. Will they need to take a parking space, or is there allocated space, if you have the answer to that. And my final point was just on the footpaths. The Goslings Turning footpath is maintained at cost to Goslings Turning residents. While the road and the footpath are accessible by pedestrians, it's not a circular public walking route as stated in the original planning application. It's a dead end with no accessible through route to the woods of Bursledon Windmill. A high increase in footfall would also increase the maintenance cost to Goslings Turning residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker, I think, is Steve Martin. Steve, do you want to come up, please?
Yes, good evening. I'm from the Morellos, and as you can see at the bottom of the telephone exchange, down to the sink area, we are direct neighbours of the development site. I would like to raise a few points. Firstly, the amount of development that's been happening in the area. But 5 years ago, the area between the motorway A27, Windmill Lane and Dogwell Lane was largely rural, largely open. Since then, basically in the last 5 years, there's been development of nearly 200 houses in that short space there. It's a huge amount of properties to dump on a little area like that. And the infrastructure really isn't there to cope with it, and it's certainly not there to cope with this amount extra. I realise it's very hard when you've developed all the way around it, then to leave this little area that's not really fair on the owners. And in many ways, a care home is a better neighbour than lots of other houses. But not this care home. This is on a whole new scale. This is enormous and will cause neighbouring properties to really feel incredibly dwarfed by it. It's also neighbouring a conservation site and is really quite a vulgar design for that. Not at all in keeping with the area. Finally, I would like to raise that the local plan also advocates for the development of the gardens of both the Morellos and Forge Mount, and this development actually blocks that in. It's quite a pertinent suggestion that we ought to develop our back gardens, but this boxes us in from being able to do that and is therefore contrary to local plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. Rebecca, did you want to come back on those, please?
I think, to be honest, I think most of the points have been covered in the presentation and report. Was there a particular question?
Steve was saying about the land being blocked at the bottom when the land's in the local plan.
We're just checking the policy map. And
Once
the local
Rebecca
plan.
checks that, John, was it a question you asked or was it something you wanted to check?
Just to clarify, if that was okay.
Very quickly.
Just to clarify, when we talked about Mum's garden, obviously it extends, the council obviously extends 9 metres from the other boundaries, garden boundaries, just to say it's at a much lower level. So when Rebecca talked about the other elevation of the care home being lower, actually it will be on the same level. So although it might be lower than the rest of the care home, it's on the same level as the garden at the bottom, because it's sunken in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Just to clarify.
Members, we all did the site visit, so we're well aware of what you've explained.
Thank you.
Rebecca.
So I think the only thing to point out is that this development site in this exact shape that it's shown here in the triangular shape is an allocated site for development. So the principle of developing it is acceptable. The rear gardens of the adjacent properties, including the Morellos, is it's not a site allocation. I wasn't sure whether you meant it's been put forward or it's...
No, it's pointed to in the local plan as desirable. But it
Oh, I
should be
see.
done.
So it's not actually an allocation.
No.
So so it's only this site here that's the allocation.
Okay, I've allowed 18 minutes instead of the usual 3. So I have to allow the applicant to have the same. I'm hoping it won't take as long as 18 minutes, but I've got to allow it. But I've got Phil first, please. I'd like to go to the front.
Thank you. I promise I won't be taking 18 minutes. Good evening, I'm Phil Brannan. I'm the Director of Development at Cllr, and we are the applicant and the end user for our proposals in front of you this evening. Nationally, no other private care operator designs, builds and operates their own care homes like Cllr do. We've a demonstrated experience in estate management, including parking on every scenario to that end, and in our care, and we also have experience of care communities. So to that end, we have 10 care communities, which is nursing home with cottages across 21 of our nursing care home portfolio. Respectfully, I understand everything that everyone has said, every neighbour in front of those, and respectfully thank you for those. Fully understand that will lead to apprehension. I do note that we have reduced our initial application in line with officer comments. And Mr. and Mrs. White, in respectfully to you, to explain why we have provided 3D models is exactly your questions that you are asking today in terms of relationships. A verified view is viewed from a static point. It is not a 3D visualization. You cannot look at the shape, the size, it is a snapshot. And during our application, we've invested both in our 3D models and the animation that was shown as well. So it was decided, in fact, it was far better to show the relationship from various angles from Gosling's Turning. This is an allocated site for development, and our proposals would be less impactful on traffic, parking pressure, than 19 residential houses, which would be policy compliant, which would have multiple car ownerships. We do thank the officers and the committee for their time. On behalf of Cllr, I'd personally like to thank the Parish Council and the Ward Councillors for their dialogue and engagement. We've very much appreciated their feedback, and it has led into our application. We also extend our thanks to the Eastleigh officers and the neighbours who we have engaged with. We've ensured that the lines of communication are open and offered one-to-one engagement throughout this application process. So who are Cllr? Our mission at Cllr is simple: to be the care provider of choice and an employer of choice in the South. Cllr was built on core values that guide us from the very heart of our business today. Our values shape the company culture and play out in every home that we design and operate, and every day through meaningful, heartfelt interactions between staff, residents and family members. Please, I must reiterate, we are not a retirement community, we are a care community. We are not a hospital. We are not a public healthcare authority facility, a hospice or a doctor's surgery. We are a private nursing care community. Cllr are family owned and have operated nursing homes since 1981. We are experienced care providers across 21 nursing homes through Hampshire, Dorset, Wiltshire and West Sussex. Our attention to detail and level investment is unmatched. It is in our best interest for us to design and operate Brookfield. What is the vision for our care community? Our design and development philosophy is to create care homes that are warm and welcoming and feel like homes themselves. Our residents are in the last years of their life. They do not deserve to be in sterile, hospital-like institutions. Our Colton Care community is a virtual gated community, purpose-built, welcoming community, making new friends, engaging with activities supported and cared for when you need it most. We're an experienced good neighbour who is respectful and open to engagement with our neighbours. We wish to become a care community Bursledon can be proud of. We will contribute to the local economy by providing employment, both in the short term, during its construction process, and job opportunities and increased local spend, and on completion with new staff required for the care home. We've agreed Section 106 contributions in line with the officers and also towards recreational disturbances. Plus, we're delivering on-site BNG and will be mitigating our nutrients in excess of £200,000 of costs. We have a large facilities management team across our portfolio, and this would include dedicated support and management of the Brookfield application site in front of you. The cottages, the Parish Council have raised comments on tenure of the age-restricted cottages. 10 out of our 21 nursing homes are care communities, with 166 age-restricted dwellings within that. So we are experienced in managing cottages alongside our nursing homes. The relationship of the cottages to the nursing homes is immediately recognisable. Cottages are sold to include a service charge for management, which includes maintenance of the garden and communal areas. We have a good neighbour scheme, home managers who check on the residents in the care homes as required. They have access to daily meals and the hairdresser for a small charge in our care homes, and owners are invited to care home events and they can hold their committee management meetings for the management of the cottages within our care homes. From a marketing or legal due diligence, it's clear a purchaser will be a specialist older person requiring bespoke accommodation with future care needs. A purchaser will generally be downsizing from a family house, freeing up the local market for family housing, and pricing will generally be above the market average to reflect the care element and restricting the type of purchaser. Purchasers either don't have a car share, or use public transport, which is available in this very sustainable location. Planning conditions ensure that people purchasing will be living as a single household. They will be designed for Part M, which is disability access, and as I explained, they will contribute to freeing up existing family housing. The nursing home. There is a need for best-in-class nursing accommodation. Monitored by CQC, we have 7 outstanding ratings, with all of others good in our portfolio. In Eastleigh Borough alone, the total number of residents aged 85 will increase 21.8%, over 4,000 between 2023 and 2030. At Colton, we have an internal design guidance of 25 parking spaces for our care homes. We exceed this number of parking spaces in the proposal before you today. We also rota minibuses. So minibuses are throughout our 21 care home portfolio. So they won't be there on an extended basis. They are allocated or for home visits, so for an external visit. So they'll arrive on a day in the week, pre-planned, arrive. We'll also be delivering sustainable and ecological enhancement of this site, and I do take the point about but we are enhancing the site with increased biodiversity, increased food for natural bats and bird wildlife. But we have done all that we can in our application to respect neighbours. We've carefully considered the site constraints, proposals and those of our adjoining neighbours, amending where we can and in line with officer feedback. We've exceeded recommended separating distances and will provide landscaping and planting to soften views from 1 to 4 Brookfield and from Gosling's Turning. In conclusion,
the officer has carefully considered and responded to all the potential issues to recommend our proposals. I would ask the committee to please support your officer and recommend and grant this application for this state-of-the-art nursing home that Bursledon could be proud of, designed to enrich both in our residents' lives and the surrounding community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. I think we've got Bryony, Stella next, sorry.
Hi everyone, my name is Bryony Stella. I'm a planning director at Savills and I'm advising Cllr on planning matters in relation to this project. And so my client's given you a very detailed run through there of the approach, so I won't keep you too long, but just to really add a few bits to that. So throughout the course of the application, Cllr have worked proactively with the council in addressing consultee comments and neighbour comments as well. We've heard from the officer in her report around some of the amendments that have been made to the scheme during the course of the application, but just to reiterate this, there's been a reduction in the size of the south-eastern projecting wing and amendments to the south-facing amenity space, a reduction in the south-facing windows at second floor level, a reduction in overall rooms from 73 to 69, and amendments to the design of the balconies. And I've certainly heard what residents have said here today, and just to confirm, in terms of the balcony designs, there are insets, so there are buffers to ensure that people cannot step right to the very edge and ensure that privacy is maintained for all neighbouring properties. And there's been amendment to landscape details throughout the project as well to again ensure that the site boundaries are suitably screened, and the case officer recommended also that there will be some additional planting which will be worked up through the discharge conditions applications. So that robust set of planning conditions that has been recommended will ensure suitable delivery of the scheme, both in terms of the construction process of the buildings and also in relation to the long-term operation and management of the site, which my client has talked about in more detail. And I just wanted to acknowledge that there were comments from residents around the officer's report referring to the size and scale of the building, and that is certainly within the report, but that is also very much balanced by an assessment of how the building does sit within the context of the site, how it has been designed and amended to ensure that there is it's suitable in terms of its context and its surroundings, and all of the constraints that have been taken into account have been assessed on balance in that officer's report to form the recommendation before you today. In terms of parking, that's obviously a key issue for your consideration as well, and we've talked about the submission of a travel plan to ensure suitable arrangements are in place long term for the travel needs of users of the building and staff as well, and that's something that will and can be monitored by the council long term also. So in summary, the officer's report robustly supports the proposal and would allow the development of this allocated site, which is on an urban edge and provides important care home facilities within the area. It's been well considered in relation to the site and its surroundings, and also that long-term management and the legacy of the site. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Becca, is there anything you need to come back on at all?
I don't believe so at this stage, no.
Okay. I've got one question for you before I pass it to members. You mentioned an update from about the air quality management. Can you just go back to that slide again? I think you said that there was no objection from...
Yeah, so you'll see in the report that at the time the report was published, there were various queries raised by the air quality officer about the content and the data used in the air quality assessment. The applicants have since updated that air quality assessment, and the air quality officer is now satisfied with the data provided and that she can support the conclusion that there would be no adverse impact on the air quality management area, subject to the conditions that have been recommended.
Okay. Thanks for that. That just doesn't sit well with me because a few years ago, probably a bit longer, this committee actually extended our air quality management from Hamble Lane up around the Windhover roundabout and includes the whole of Providence Hill right down to the bridge. So that really doesn't sit well with me when this committee has put in developers' contributions and done a report that we were concerned about the area from officer advice. I just wanted to make that point, so just to let you know why I was bringing that one up. Over to members. Steve.
Chair, I've got some questions as well. I've got 6, because one of them is associated with that. Can you confirm if the officer reporting on the air quality management effects has taken into account the dumping of Junction 8 improvements on our council? Is basically it's not going to go ahead, so there are going to be no improvements on and around Providence Hill, and I wanted to know whether those comments about air quality have taken that into account, because we've only just heard in the last couple of weeks. That's the first question.
I'm afraid without actually looking through the full content of that air quality report, I wouldn't be able to say, but I mean, the air quality officer who's commented is an expert in her field. She would have considered all the relevant considerations in coming to her conclusion, and there was a very detailed discussion about the content and the data used to inform that decision. So we have to, you know, we have to go by what our professional officers are telling us. So that's what we've.
Do we know when that came back? Which report? When they came back with this?
It was about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
So
probably
it's
not then.
before Junction 8 was announced as
Yeah.
being done. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question, 6 spaces short, am I right on, is that on site, just to confirm?
Yeah.
4 places in the lay-by are there at the moment, yeah?
Yeah.
There is a dispute with number 4 that about the side boundary, which would, if upheld, mean that there would be no parking for number 4 on site, because you wouldn't be able to fit a car on Harvey's Drive, and the other car in that picture we saw earlier was parked in front of the conservatory, which is actually on Colson's land. So although we can't consider the impact of that dispute, because it's a civil matter for lawyers and not for us, nevertheless I need to understand the full impact of the shortages of spaces, because it seems that there's 2 more spaces there that are being displaced, depending on the results of the civil action, of course.
Steve, can you ask all your questions?
Yep, I can do that.
Yeah, please.
So I want clarity on that, if that's possible. Question on, it was suggested in the report, and it's been suggested on site as well, that there is the possibility of limited, very limited parking on Providence Hill in the surrounding area. My understanding is that there are cars that park and vehicles that park on Providence Hill illegally, because they're either parked fully on the verges or they are parked 2 wheels on the road, both of which are illegal as far as I understand. Unfortunately, it's not for us to police, because it's Hampshire Highways land, and we've asked several times what they're doing about cars parking on Providence Hill illegally, and they haven't done anything. So they are not spaces. So there is no official parking spaces or unofficial parking spaces on Providence Hill. So I just wanted to ask a question about that. We've heard a lot tonight about the 5 homes up the top of the hill. What we haven't got is a confirmation of what would happen after the first occupiers or the first purchasers. We understand, as Phil has highlighted, what they're intending to do with those properties. But as far as I can see, there's no confirmation or indication as to what happens after the first tenant leaves those properties or sells those properties. So I just wondered whether we could have an answer to reassure me on that. And the final question, this was raised the other evening, the ownership of the brook. There appears to be a ransom strip down through between the site and Gosling's Turning, and there is a potential for that brook to be, shall we say, polluted, and as it goes out into the River Hamble, that obviously is an issue for us, because somebody would be responsible for clearing that up, and I would like to know if that's this council, the county council, or whether it's either the developer or somebody else, maybe the management company, if there is one at management company at Gosling's Turning. I don't know who's responsible for that strip, and that brook is really important because it can't be built on, but it needs to be protected. So that's the other question.
If you turn your mic off, I'll ask Rebecca to come back. Thank you. I think
I've logged 5 questions. I think you said 6, but I've logged 5.
Well,
Yeah.
one was sort of
Okay, so we've talked about the ecology assessment. This second question was about the loss of parking for number 4 if his driveway can be used. We can't take that into account at the moment because we have no idea or indication that that's actually a scenario. At the moment there's a driveway there which can take up to 2 cars, and that's how the Highway Authority has considered that there is parking for that property there. As we have said, we can't get involved in the land ownership issues that have arisen, and we can't guess what the outcome would be. So that is a bit of a difficult one to comment on. In terms of, say, question 3 was then about what parking is available on Providence Hill. My reference to limited parking is the lay-by. So there is that lay-by in front of 1 to 4 Providence Hill, 1 to 4 Brookfield, which can formally take the 4 cars. So that's the parking that's in the immediate vicinity of that site, because I haven't looked at the whole stretch of Providence Hill. Question 4 was what would happen to the properties after they're sold? I mean, I can't answer that specifically, but I would assume they would be sold on under the same conditions as originally, in terms of, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, Colton Cllr. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'd also, on that point, I suppose I would point out that it's an urban site, it's in the urban edge. There's no, in principle, objection to having dwellings here. So it's not an issue, it's not really a planning matter that would, you know, it would be difficult for us to sort of be reasonable to impose conditions, for example, that those dwellings couldn't be sold on. But as it is part of the same site, I think Colton Cllr explained how they would be operated. And then the final one was about ownership of the brook. So I have looked into this. The majority of a section of that brook here appears to be, and I have had it confirmed, that it's in joint ownership between Colton Cllr and I believe it's Foreman Homes that own the Gosling's Turning site. So there is a joint responsibility there for maintenance. There is a section of unregistered land a bit further along, which our legal team has looked into, but it's not something we can establish. But again, it's not something we can consider in the sense that it wouldn't affect the planning decision, because the drainage strategy for the site has been designed so that it doesn't increase pollution on the brook, and that's been carefully looked at by our ecologists, and they're satisfied that it wouldn't, because, as you said, it leads into the River Hamble, so if it did pollute that brook, you'd then lead to impacts on the special protection area. So that has been fully considered, and there is management responsibility for a large stretch of it.
Okay. Just didn't want it to be a no man's land.
Any of the members?
I don't know whether Steve's finished.
That was just a question.
Oh, just a question. Sorry, no questions, thank you.
No other questions? Okay. Just in response, I think Rebecca's just said about the cottages, it being an urban site. I get that. That's an urban site with 5 2-bedroom cottages plus 76-bed care home, or 69 now, sorry, 69 now. So it is still quite a lot from where we started off. So we get that it's an urban site, but you know, you can can make comments to those cottages because it is still quite a lot from when we first set off. Okay, so that's questions over. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. When we sit here, and there was an application at the previous meeting, for those that were in attendance, members have a responsibility not just to consider the planning applications which we are governed to by law, but also the locality and what our responsibilities are, not just to the developer or the applicant, but also to the people that already live there and in the surrounding area. So we have to consider that, and it can get quite emotional sometimes. So that certainly happened at the last meeting, and this is very similar. There's a lot of emotion. It affects people's lives, there's no doubt about that. Having said that, highways, my favourite subject. Our Hampshire highways, I don't know which side of the bed they get out of in the morning. I have said so many times in meetings that they don't live here and they don't understand the issues. We've already heard tonight that Junction 8 improvements, which a lot of the development that's happened in recent years was not only financially contributing to the cost, but also relying on to make the future improvements that would make those developments sustainable. The fact that it's been dropped leaves a big hole in the chances to make things improved in that area, Providence Hill, Hamble Lane, Bursledon Road, etc. There's not much we can do about that because these sites have already been approved for planning. But to say that there's no impact is absolutely ludicrous, and it's actually embarrassing for the Hampshire highways to say there's no impact. It's crazy. There's no parking on that road. It can get really, really busy at rush hour particularly. It is a real problem for vehicles exiting a number of accesses along Providence Hill, turning right where they're going into those sites, not just this one, but all those sites accessed along Providence Hill, turning right into them or turning right out of them. We wanted traffic lights when we had Oakley Vale. We said, surely we can put traffic lights there to allow for right turns. No, Hampshire Highways wouldn't do it, they wouldn't approve it. So that's what it is. They've said there's no problem, so we can't use it as a reason if we choose to refuse it. It's just crazy. They don't consider the real impact of development on highways, and the loss of the Junction 8 improvements really affects that badly. And I think it also makes a difference with the air quality management scheme. I'd really like to know if our officer made his report before that information came out. Moving on to the houses, the 5 houses. My uncle was in a Cllr home down in Christchurch for 18 months. He originally went in there for respite care after an operation, and he sadly passed away 18 months later, having refused to come out. He lived on his own, he didn't want to go back to his house, and we were very close to selling his house in order to continue allowing him to stay there. He loved it, I have to say. It did provide him with the sort of care that he needed towards the end of his life. That particular building does have houses or apartments attached to it, and I've mentioned that to Phil and his colleagues in the past when we've had meetings. I understand how that works, and I was still quite concerned about, as you heard in my question, about what happens down the road to the next tenant and so on. And I've been assured that it would remain that the sort of concept. I've actually heard tonight as well that the care is also available to the residents of those properties. So my thinking on that has changed actually. If this was a planning application for say 15 houses, 19 is nonsense, but 15, say 15 houses, and 5 of them were up in that corner, we wouldn't be even considering it. I think now I know the situation, there's no reason that I would object to that. The problem I have with this development is down the bottom behind Brookfield, and in particularly the 4th floor element. Until we actually stood in the gardens of 1 to 4 Brookfield, and I know the measurements are taken from the backs of the houses to the fronts of the new build or whatever. We all know what the regulations are, but that is such an imposing sight to be stood in the bottom of number 1 particularly, looking up and saying, well, we're a few feet, 20 feet, whatever it is, to the main bulk of the building. And that basically takes away the sort of impression of privacy, which is a concern. I just don't feel that the 4th story makes this a comfortable building to have behind those cottages. Next door you've got the telephone exchange between Morello's and this site. And when you stood in number 1 Brookfield, the roof of the telephone exchange is pretty well level with the top of the extension to 1 Brookfield. If I laid on the roof, I'd be pretty well in line with the roof of the telephone exchange. I think something around that height or a little bit higher wouldn't have the same impact on the residents of Brookfield. And remember, I did say at the beginning that we do have a responsibility to not make people's lives worse with something new. It's a balance. So therefore, it is a balanced decision, but I think the main reason that I have for a refusal, and I will recommend a refusal, is I think more work needs to be done on working around Brookfield particularly, and that 4th story element. It's just overbearing, and it will be seen. Some of this will be seen from the main road, but that is the main reason that I would say I'm still not happy. I think more work can be done on that element to soften it and reduce the impact on those cottages, because at the moment what this application does, it affects their lives without a shadow of a doubt. The parking issue and the overbearingness of the 4th story will have an impact on their lives. There's no doubt about that. So I'm going to propose refusal on those grounds pretty well only. I think more work needs to be done, and I appreciate the fact that we've had a lot of discussions. I appreciate that we've had visits to the homes of the residents of the Brookfield cottages, and we've had correspondence from the residents of Goslin's Turning. And our officers have given, in fact, reading the report, I crossed off a lot of stuff that I thought, oh, I'm not happy about that, I'm not happy about that. actually read the report 3 times today and reduced quite a lot of the concerns I had, because the report is actually pretty good and excellent and covers most of it, because it's nearly there. In planning terms, I think it's nearly there. I'm just not happy with the 4th element. I think it's too much. So I'm going to recommend refusal. Landscaping, by the way, yeah, I'm pleased with that. The extra landscaping is just the 4th element.
I know you've moved to refusal, Steve, but I'm going to hold it out for the reasons for refusal until everybody's spoken, because you said, and just for those reasons, but there could be other reasons. Yeah, exactly. So we'll go through the reasons for refusal if that is the way that other members are going towards the end. Jane.
Thank you, Chair.
No, I'm sorry, we can't. We're in.
I'm just asking a simple question.
We can't because we're in.
I'm not familiar with the setup here. I would just like to know for myself and other people that may not know who Mr. Cole represents, because I'm not sure.
Mr. Who?
I know you are the planning committee from the council, but concerning these 4 people on this side, I would like to know who they represent.
You met them all when they did the site visit, but no, please don't argue with me, because I've been very lenient this evening. No, but it has gone to members, and we've all met you, and they are all councillors that represent Bursledon, Hamble and Netley, and we all sit on the planning application. It was explained at the beginning of the meeting.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Okay, thank you. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in principle, I think there's a need for a care home in Bursledon. From a design point of view, I actually quite like the design, personally, but obviously design is quite subjective. And I was impressed by the fact that developers made efforts to amend the original plans, and they have taken into account some of the requests that we as councillors made and from the officers as well. It will bring employment opportunities to the area, and I don't at all doubt the credentials of Cllr Care and the care and attention to detail really that's gone into this planning application. But, excuse me, I hope I can find my way around my rather confused notes here. Yeah, I can't help thinking that if Wonderful Brookfield wasn't there, would we be viewing this differently? In other words, they are really acting as a screen for the bulk of the building from Providence Hill. So it would be, as we've already heard, that there are no other buildings this size in the village. And I think it would be much more of an impact if Wonderful Brookfield weren't there. Also, with the parking issue, if we were looking at, say, Wonderful Brookfield when it was a new development and those 4 cottages were being built, we would insist that there had to be some provision of parking included, otherwise we wouldn't permit. So I don't see how, in that case, we can remove parking from properties that are already there and have been using the parking. I agree with Steve's point about the size. I think the size and the bulk, I think that extra story is hugely problematic with this. And also I think it's very telling that the animation that we saw shows from Gosling's Turning, shows the care home, but it doesn't show any images going through Brookfield, or and I know this point's been made as well, or images from Brookfield's gardens. We have none of those tonight. Or images, in fact, from Providence Hill. So, yeah, that's just a few thoughts, Chair, at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Any other members at this point? Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. Most of the points that I wrote in on my notes have been picked up, reference parking, and also the likelihood in the report about people maybe parking on the entrance because of the where we haven't got enough parking, because he said there is no saying that then people could park on the corner as you at the entrance. But I was told when I was a young lad, never measure off a drawing unless it's a working drawing. Now, being on the building industry for a while, your 3 metres or 5 metres at an angle is very deceiving, because once you've got a working drawing, once you've got your land layout set out, it could be closer than what it says on the drawing, on that drawing you've got there. So I wouldn't accept that. So there's also the bulk at the bottom of the garden from the building, because it is huge. If you just try to perceive what it's like rather from the 3D to what you actually have, it's huge. So I would like to have a care home there. I quite liked your layout and all the processes that you've gone through, but it's just the bulk of the bottom of the garden which will have an effect on the people of Brookfield. And I think it should be looked at again. That's my point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Okay, I'm just going to put a few things that concern me on the table as well, which is, it hasn't been mentioned, crossing over from one side of the A27 to the other, extremely dangerous. One of the things that this committee has tried to get Hampshire Highways to do for decades. So that is one concern. I've also got an access safety concern. Coming in and out of that access, it's a 40-mile-an-hour road. It is a concern. I know Hampshire Highways have said no objection, but coming in and out on there, as we know when we've done our site visits to this particular site, when you're parked up on the side of the road and then you're trying to get back onto the road at 40 miles an hour, it's dangerous. So that is another one of my concerns. I have a concern over the green transport that's being proposed in this site. What public transport? Us living in this area, we know that the buses, I mean, I think it's one bus services every 1 hour and 47 minutes or something ridiculous like that. We don't have public transport that is reliable to use to go to and from work. So that to me was a bit of a red herring and is concerns. There's nothing that has been brought in this plan. I'm not going to say Cllr have done nothing to try and alleviate some of our issues. They have tried to work with us, but there's nothing here tonight that has said to me, yes, 4 stories is great. It's not. We've been out on site. To me, it would be get rid of those five cottages, bring the 4-story down, spread those care beds across the site. Because I know that it was on there, we had the cone looking up to the windmill. That land is so low at that point that you could get a single or at least 2-story on some of that element and just move it across the site. So that was a concern. One of the other concerns, members, you know that I'm Cabinet Member for Health and Community Safety, so safety is one of the issues. This is extremely worrying. I had a conversation with one of the partners at our local surgery who has not been consulted on this at all. And he is gravely concerned of the burden that it's going to put to his surgery. He does know what he's talking about because we have a care home in Netley. So they're already, the care providers for those in there. And I know that Rebecca has said to me this evening that the ICB have said no objection. They've not consulted the GP surgery to find out what care and what level of care the GPs can give. It was mentioned earlier, we know, because we are patients in there, maybe we should declare an interest on that, but we know that the issues that we've got ourselves in using that surgery, and it just, I kind of laughed because it's quite ironic. We're putting a care home into our area, which we do need, but we're not consulting our GP surgery, who's going to provide that care for these residents. it's kind of quite laughable. So I will take this up in another hat with the ICB, because I think it's ridiculous that they're saying no contributions and no concerns. But that's where I am at the moment. Steve?
Just on that, sorry to come back. It's a senior dentist. My dentist, which I won't name, I can't get my wife into because she wants to move from one that's let her down quite badly, and it's full up and it's got a long waiting list. So we have a shortage of dentists as well, and older people still need their teeth checked.
Most elderly people that I've dealt with, and it sounds really awful, and I'm really sorry to anybody else, but I've got very little teeth, and most have got dentures, so I haven't even thought about dentists, but yeah, it is a concern. Jane?
Just on the buses, the main route, the X4, X5, there are 3 every hour, I think it is roughly every hour, during the week, and 2 at weekends, but they don't run late. I think the last one starts at 7 or something from Southampton. And the bus stops are at the top of the opposite hill, near the vets, or down in Lowford. So you would have to walk up a hill, obviously, to get there, and then cross the road, depending on which direction you were coming from. And the trains are 1 an hour from Southampton to Portsmouth. Thank you.
Anybody else got anything to add to this at the moment?
All my points were raised by these 3.
Okay. Okay, so I think at the moment it's been proposed to refuse, and I think that was on bulk, size and mass of the building, especially the 4-storey element.
Referring really to sort of 4th storey. Yes, Chair, and also on the shortage of on-site car parking.
Okay.
Bearing in mind there is no official parking on Holland apart from the lay-by. And how both of those actually would have a material effect on the quality of life of residents living nearby.
Okay. I would like it added whether it's, I don't think we can say it's a refusal, but the concerns over the lack of GP provision, I would like that noted because I think that's really important. And safety access going into that 40-mile-an-hour road coming in and out of that site.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're just going to add the safety crossing as well, because that is on record. And I know that Hampshire have said that they've got no objections, but as Steve said, they don't live here. We do. We know what the concerns are. We use the roads. We cross the roads. So those. Rebecca wants to come back on one thing just before we come back, Steve.
I just wanted to come back. The 4 points we've just mentioned: bulk size. Sorry, Councillor Payne. The bulk size, mass of the building, shortage of on-site car parking, lack of GP provision, and access safety. I just wanted to give my views on kind of what could legitimately go for a reason for refusal. I think there are the bulk size, mass of the building in terms of the impact on the neighbours.
It's the height.
Would the height, yeah, so the 4, I think I've noted 4-storey. So yeah, that one I think I'm accepting there. Shortage of on-site parking, if we're looking at it in the sense of sort of the increased risk of indiscriminate parking on Providence Hill and therefore the high road safety risk of that, it would be difficult because we don't have an objection from Hampshire Highways, and the same goes for the access design, the safety of the access, because there has been no highway safety issue raised by Hampshire Highways. So I need to flag that up as the planning officer. You know, that is, we haven't got an objection from Highways. So and similar with the GP provision, we had a quite a clear response from the NHS, the ICB, who we are required to consult. They didn't request any contributions and they didn't raise an objection. So again, we struggle to justify that.
I'm quite happy to keep that in. The GP was so passionate about it that he did say that if he could be here this evening, it was only on my way here that I managed to speak to him. If he could have been here this evening, he would have been speaking out against it, and he would be happy to support us if this went further. He's that passionate about it.
Chair, I'm happy to propose those, and also the comment that if we were considering this for housing, we would have the same view on school provision as well.
And I think it's the lack of parking. I think ours, is it two-bedroom properties are
Yes.
supposed to be 2 parking spaces?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got 5 two-bedroom properties with how many parking spaces for those?
To remind myself, I think it was 6.
So we've got 6 spaces for 10. Where are they going to go? Where are those visitors or you know, whatever going to go? So, you know, it's I know that sometimes we're told that these are loose issues, if you like, but they're not. They're real issues. So I think we would be not doing due diligence if we didn't put them all in, because they are all very, very strong concerns for us.
Yeah, Chair, we consider planning applications that we want in order that we have quality development and that benefits those moving in. And we also need to consider the effects on the quality of life of those that live around any development. And that is the case here. I would also add again that it's actually pretty close. They've done a really good job of consulting, etc. There are things that everybody disagrees on, of course there are, but on the whole, there isn't a lot there. If it were to come back, it's just a question of that impact of that main building.
This is just to say that if we are going down a refusal, because this would be subject to a Section 106 agreement, we would need to have a refusal related to the lack of contributions, which would otherwise have been secured through the 106.
Yeah, it's a bit tough,
Yeah.
but
I'm happy to second the refusal of this, because I think it really is important that when we're putting things in place, we need to make sure that we're doing the right things. But is there any other comments that people want to talk about, to mention? Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded to refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? That's everybody. Okay, so that planning application has been refused. But I would ask the applicant, if you're going to come back with another one, please feel free to speak to us, keep us updated on what you're doing, and hopefully we'll sort of continue that working relationship there. But thank you very much. Those that want to leave, please feel free to do so. Just going to take a minute here anyway. Sorry, before you all go, you won't be able to get out unless you're let out. So we'll just hold the meeting for just 1 minute to allow people out. just for 1 minute. We appreciate you waiting probably for the next application, but we just need to resolve some issues here.
Sorry, is there a button to
You've got to stay there.
Okay, I'm going to bring us back into the meeting because Ross isn't needed to see the plan, but we have got members of the public here that we need to make sure we're not holding up unnecessarily. So the next application is Bursledon Congregational Church, and Claire, you're reporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The next application is for the conversion of Bursledon Congregational Church into 3 two-bed dwellings with associated parking, integral garage, amenity space, elevation alterations and insertion of roof lights and raised decking. The proposal is a resubmission of an earlier refused application which went to appeal. The appeal inspector considered that the scheme was acceptable but dismissed the appeal as it did not secure the necessary mitigation. The appeal decision is a material consideration which should be given very significant weight when determining this current planning application. The site is outlined on red on the plans. It's located on the eastern side of School Road at the junction with Spring Grove and consists of a long single-storey building with a small parking area at the front. Spring Grove is a narrow lane which is privately owned and leads to a small collection of dwellings. At the northeastern tip is a footpath which connects Portsmouth Road to School Lane. The site is within a very sustainable location, close to Lowford Village Centre. The surrounding area is predominantly residential, with the building's longest southern elevation alongside the neighbouring garden at 11 Redcroft Lane. To the far southern side of the neighbour's garden is a watercourse, and the application site is within flood zone 3, which has a high risk of flooding. The site is close to a collection of locally listed buildings along School Road, and it's on the main approach into Old Bursledon Conservation Area. Here are some photos of the application site. In the first photo you can see the single-storey building facing onto School Road, and in front of this is the site's parking area. The building has some attractive decorative features, including arch windows and brick detailing around the edges. The second photo has been taken from the junction of Spring Grove and School Road and shows the building and car parking area in a bit more detail. You can see that the site is very overgrown and the building is in need of repair. You may also be able to make out the railings along the side boundary, which we removed to provide better access to the car parking area. The final photo shows the view from the far end of Spring Grove, where the longest elevation of the building is fully visible. The building is divided into 2 sections, with the main arch windows only present on the front section. The building then steps down to a longer, lower section towards the rear. Next, we move on to the current proposal. The application is to convert the existing building into 3 dwellings. Each of the dwellings has a small rear garden with a raised decking and a shed or garage for cycle storage. Along the rear boundary is a hedgerow, and the green line you can see on here indicates areas of additional planting. The existing fencing along the southern elevation will be raised to a height of 1.7 metres to prevent views into the garden of 11 Redcroft Lane. The proposal includes 6 on-site car parking spaces. 3 of the car parking spaces are at the front in the existing car park. Another one is to the northern side of the car park, and the final 2 spaces are in an internal garage and driveway located between dwellings 2 and 3. The spaces within the garage and the drive do rely on the area in front of 1 and 2 Meadow Grove for manoeuvring, and this is where some of the other residents do use for parking. The vehicle tracking details at the bottom are shown in green on the diagrams below, and the restricted access to these spaces did form part of the main reason for refusal on the previous planning application. However, while the appeal inspector acknowledged the access issues, she noted that there were other parking spaces within the locality and therefore didn't consider that any overspill parking from the development would unacceptably restrict traffic flows or visibility on the public highway. Next, we turn to the floor plans, which show the new internal garage and drive that's been created between dwellings 2 and 3. The garage involves a small single-storey extension on the southern side of the building and replaces an existing tin shed. The new dwellings have 2 bedrooms, and most of the living accommodation is on the ground floor. This includes a double-height living area which leads onto the deck and gardens to the rear. The proposal also includes a new mezzanine floor containing one of the bedrooms and en-suites, and these spaces are lit by new roof lights on the side elevations. This slide shows the existing and proposed elevations as viewed from Spring Grove and School Road. The changes to the building are relatively modest and retain much of the existing window features in the main part of the building with the addition of the 3 roof lights. On the west elevation is the entrance to dwelling 1, and on the north elevations are the entrances for dwelling 2 and 3, along with the new garage for dwelling 3. The next slide shows the elevations facing towards the neighbouring properties. The single-storey extension is on the southern side of the building, and its roofline, you can see, follows the shape of the existing property. Again, the proposed changes involve minor alterations to some of the new windows and doors leading out to the rear decking. The proposal also introduces another 3 roof lights on the southern elevation, and there are no changes on the eastern elevation. Before we go on to the material consideration section, there is just one additional informative I would like to add to the decision notice, and this relates to the vehicular access rights to Spring Grove, as this is an unadopted lane. While the access rights are dealt with under a separate legal process, the informative is to remind the developer that it is their responsibility to ensure the access rights are in place before the new residents would move in. So next we move on to the key considerations. The site is within the urban edge and it's within a sustainable location where the principle of development is acceptable. The community building has been vacant for a long period of time and is considered surplus to requirements, and the residential conversion would make a good use of the land and contributes to the council's 5-year housing land supply. In terms of flooding, a revised flood risk assessment has been provided, and this demonstrates the building's finished floor level will be set above predicted flood levels, and a safe access will be available during times of flooding. The new hard surfacing that's proposed will be porous, and this will be conditioned, and the conversion won't change the existing surface water runoff from the site. In terms of key character and appearance, the proposal is considered to be a sympathetic conversion which reflects the existing features of the building and will improve its rundown appearance. The proposal will have a positive impact on the appearance of the locality as well. In terms of sustainability, the conversion of the existing building will reduce the carbon footprint compared to a complete redevelopment of the site. In terms of living conditions and residential amenity, the proposed dwellings do meet the required floor space standards, and while garden sizes are limited, the site is within walking distance of Bursledon recreational ground. The residential conversion is not considered to have an unacceptable impact upon neighbouring residents and does meet the council's residential amenity guidance. In terms of ecology and trees, a recent bat survey has been undertaken, and this indicates that the site is not being used as a bat roost. The proposal also includes ecology enhancements such as bat and bird boxes and additional planting on site, and there are no protected or significant trees within the site. For car parking, while it's acknowledged that the planning inspector acknowledged the access issue, she did consider that there was sufficient off-road parking in the locality so as not to significantly affect traffic movements or impact on the public highway. And there have been no changes since the appeal decision in April 2024 to justify the local authority taking a different decision on this issue. So, subject to securing the contributions towards the new forest recreation mitigation strategy and the solar mitigation strategy, the recommendation is to delegate that to the planning manager in conjunction with the chair and vice chair to grant planning permission in line with the conditions set out within the report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire. I've got one member of the public wanting to speak in objection. I think it's Paul Alderton. I'd like to come up to the front. Sorry to have kept you waiting as well.
That's all right. It's freezing back there. Good evening. Thanks for your time. I'll keep it short and sweet. I've got the property at the end. If you want to put up the site plan, please, that just explain who I am. So I live at the end of Spring Grove, at the top right-hand corner of that diagram. And if you've got it's hard to see because there's small images. My main objection is about the impact on the 3 properties and myself, so it's 4 residences in total, and the impact of that tandem garage for dwelling 3 on Spring Grove. There's currently 4 vehicles parked along the front of those 2 Meadowview cottages, where it says Spring Grove. So those swing arcs effectively remove those. The swing arcs for the front parking spaces remove the access. It's at the end of Spring Grove Post and School Road there. So there's a displacement of approximately 4 vehicles, probably more, onto Portsmouth Road, which, as mentioned earlier in this meeting, is where we've got a bit of a pedestrian crossing and traffic issue. So there's 4 extra cars somewhere going to squeeze on Portsmouth Road. That's the main problem. I think there's an opportunity to try and be helpful rather than just objectionable. We know there was a previous application that put all the parking spaces at the front. I think if there was a way of achieving a bit of negotiation on the area between School Road and where it says parking, there's a grass verge there that would increase a bit of space at the front there. So that's the sort of summary, that the objection and some thoughts. We haven't had a lot of correspondence or any correspondence with the applicant, unfortunately. We'd welcome that because we think there's a dialogue to be had and mutually beneficial. We don't want to direct property there any more than anybody else does, and I just think there's a way forward that could be sensible.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I would say there was a planning application to put the parking within the front car parking area. Unfortunately, it would have used tandem spaces, so you've got the problem of the cars behind having to, the cars in front having to move to get the cars behind back. And also, for the cars in front with a swinging distance, it would cause a problem along school lanes. So although it sounds like it's a solution, it isn't really, unfortunately.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Members? Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yet another planning application with a civil matter attached to it, because as I understand it, Springbrook Road being unadopted probably means that it's in private hands. So I did email Paul actually, because we've had correspondence in the past to ask him whether he knew who owned that piece of land, whether it was the residents of Meadowview and Glencoe Cottage, or whether it was a third party even. I don't think Paul came out and said he didn't know. He wasn't sure.
I think it's unadopted. As far as
So
I'm
it's just unadopted road. The problem we have with unadopted road is somebody's got to maintain it. Somebody must have to maintain that piece of road, because it's not unadopted road. We have it in the Crescent and the corner and on the Portsmouth Road. They know who's responsible for their piece of land. They all are. And they get most upset when somebody sort of tries to get out of it. They can be quite complicated arrangements, and they are civil matters. They are not planning matters. The issue we have here is if we basically approve it, because there isn't much we can say following the inspector's report from the previous application. So I'm loath to refuse it, because I think there's nothing to refuse at all. Can we put a condition on, strengthen that condition to say the developer needs to have the civil matters sorted out prior to development, or is it purely we can only insist on it before they inhabit them?
Unfortunately, civil matters are outside of the planning process, so we can't have a condition that makes them do something under a civil law. So we can't condition it, but we can put an informative on, so we can remind them, but we can't condition it, unfortunately.
Because they wouldn't be, in theory, they could build, they could do the reconstruction and not be able to use that access.
In theory, that's correct, but we have, under the planning process, we have no powers to force them to do it, because civil law is different from planning regulations. So unfortunately, we can't condition it.
Difficult one, isn't it? Because again, you're affecting people's.
Can you put your mic on, Steve?
Sorry. Again, you're like in the previous application, you're affecting people's quality of life through a decision that's outside our remit. So I really don't know, to be honest, where we stand on that, because if we refuse it, then I'm not convinced that an inspector would uphold that refusal.
An inspector wouldn't be able to, because planning decisions have to be based on planning considerations, and they have to be based on our policies. Our policies, because legal matters outside of that, our policies don't cover it, so if we went to appeal, we would very likely get costs against us because it would be seen as unreasonable.
So in approving it, we're not actually making the situation worse because the inspector wouldn't be able to consider it anyway. So they're in the same position as we are with that then. So that sort of sums it. I'm not happy about it, but it sort of sums it up. If we can put that wording and make it as strong as possible, that then, you know, they need to sort that civil matter out prior to occupation, it's going to mean lawyers, unfortunately, to establish who is responsible for that lane. This is something we can't control, and clearly the inspector couldn't either. If we refused it on that, they'd say, he would say, well, I'm on the same boat. I can't comment on that. So on that basis, I think I will recommend approval, but it worries me greatly. Reluctantly.
Thank you, Steve. Jane?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just following on from what Steve said, you would hope that if somebody was buying number 3 that they would have a solicitor with enough savvy to sort it out first for them, but having heard things we heard earlier in the evening, not necessarily. I was so pleased to see this come back to us because the site, as you know, anybody knows, walk past it frequently, and it's just got worse and worse and worse with vandalism with the cars and things. It was always going to be difficult, and I know we've had other applications for the site before, just because of the constrictions of where it is and what it is. But I was so pleased to see that this actually uses the original building and the original features, rather than, you know, as Claire was saying about the sustainability, but also aesthetically as well, rather than sort of knocking it down and starting again and building a square box. You know, this should be a real asset, I think, to the village. But obviously that parking needs to be sorted out. I would happily second to permit, and I really look forward to seeing it being transformed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Alison?
I have a quick question about the parking. Could you just go back to those photos that you put up a minute ago, please? So, for the first property, you've got a car alongside the building, haven't you? Is there not enough room further down the lane that the cars for property 3 could be also alongside the building, which then would solve your issue of the vehicle having to move across to where you normally park your car, I guess?
Do you mean alongside the building itself?
Yeah. That gives you an idea of what it looks like, see in picture 3.
Yeah, so
So
instead of having a
if
pathway there.
you go back to the plan, the first, that one there, see, along the front property, you've got the cars in front and then you've got the one beside,
I
haven't
think
you?
there's front doors there though, isn't there?
Yeah.
You've got 2 front doors on the front of that as well.
But would there not be enough room beside the front doors for like parallel parking against the building?
I think
It's going to be difficult to arrange that. And I think also
this is the scheme before us tonight, so I think we've got to determine it on its merits. And like I said, unfortunately, because the planning inspector said that the parking's okay, I don't think we can then defer it or go or refuse.
Another little question I've got, because we have this issue at home. How wide is the garage? Because cars are huge now, aren't they? And our car don't fit in our garage. And because if that garage isn't wide enough, then that totally negates that space and that garage as parking for property 3, doesn't it?
I totally get that, but it's because the inspector, rightly or wrongly, said that the displaced parking can park on Portsmouth Road where there's plenty of parking.
But if the parking that's allocated is no good, that's even more of a problem, isn't it? Because at the moment that property 3 has 2 parking spaces, potentially, but if they're not wide enough for a modern day car, then...
I've just measured it on the plans, and the garage is 3 by 6, which is what we require for under our parking standards. So yes, it would comply with our parking standards. It's the access that I had concerns with originally, but like I said, the inspector was going
Okay,
over
well,
all
just
just on that.
a personal
Yeah, of course.
query, because our car doesn't fit in our garage.
All you have to do is climb over the seat gate and then...
Can I just ask you to turn your mic off there, please? Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No, okay. It's just, for me, I have that same concern about it's a civil matter, because we've had it before where, you know, we have to give planning permission because it's on the planning guidelines, and then it causes issues afterwards. We just have to hope that morally the applicant does the right thing. And you know, if it's not, it's picked up during the searches, and you know, it doesn't get solved properly. So that is the only thing. It's so frustrating, and it's always frustrated me since day one of doing this, because it just knocks an issue, a real issue, onto somebody else. Stephen, if you're very quick.
Yeah, very quick. For Paul's benefit, really, it would be worth contacting the land registry to find out who actually owns and is responsible. Also, your deeds probably indicate the rights of access. Start with that, and then look at speaking to somebody between the three houses as to how you can go forward on that. Because, as I said, we can't refuse it on that.
You said very quickly, Steve. Jane.
Also very quick, can we just hope as well that the developer actually has some dialogue with the people living in Spring Grove? Thank you.
We can hope, we will see. But just very quickly on what Steve said, also with civil matters, household insurance, quite often you've got legal cover that will help you with those matters. Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded to permit this application. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much. Sorry, members, my computer decided to shut itself down. So we've got for noting as well, we've got the planning appeal that's been lodged for Hound Corner Fruit Farm, 21 Bowers Drive, Hackett's in High Street, land south of Peewit Hill,